So Joe Rogan actually had left-winger Ben Burgis on his podcast. Now Ben Burgis is actually a socialist. I believe he's also a professor of logic. So he's pretty left-wing. He's done debates with people like Destiny and others. And so this was easily the most left-wing guest he's had on in a while. And I think he had Ben Burgis on because of obviously all of the stuff that's been going on with him being considered a right-winger. And so I think by strategy he decided to bring Ben Burgis on just to at least seed a little bit of doubt on that claim and say, oh well, I'm bringing on both sides kind of thing. I can't remember who the true more most left-wing guest was before this. This is obviously very left-wing because Ben Burgis is a literal socialist. He's not a social democrat like Sam Cedar or Kyle Kulinski, where it's like a mix of capitalism and socialism. No, he believes in the full workers owning the means of production, right? So definitely, for sure, that's left-wing. That's actually left-wing. I wouldn't even argue that in a vacuum, social democracy is even left-wing. I'd say it's center, maybe even slightly right of center, in terms of a regular political spectrum. Obviously, in the United States, with the Overton window we have here, obviously, it is left-wing. But so he has him on, I believe, because of all the controversy. But this means that they get to talk about stuff I think I saw them talking about Michael Brooks, rest in peace. And so here he's going to talk about Kyle Kulinski. So what's going to be interesting here is he's going to make some comments praising Kyle Kulinski. I saw this over on the Secular Talk subreddit, by the way. And he's going to praise him and explain that, he's somebody who really knows politics. Check it out.
You want to get involved deeply into the weeds in politics, it's tremendous amount of hours for years and years and years just to get a base understanding of what's going on. Yeah. That's why it's so impressive when you talk to someone who really does know a lot about politics. Whenever I talk to my friend Kyle Kulinski, whenever I talk to him about politics, that motherfucker knows a lot. So when we had the End of the World podcast, when it was the election, this past year, when we brought him, I brought him out, you're the voice of reason. You actually understand what's going on here. And he called it every step of the way. See, all these people that had these conspiracy theories about Trump, the mail-in votes, he explained. He's the mail-in votes are going to be majority Democrat votes. Yeah. And he goes, so if you look at Trump getting way ahead in places like Pennsylvania and a couple of these other states, he's like, this is what's going on. There's a lot of the Republican folks are going to show up and they're going to vote in person. Mm-hmm. And then the mail-in is going to be overwhelmingly Democratic. Yep. And then he's probably going to lose a lot of numbers overnight. And they're like, oh, we went to bed and he was ahead. But then he's like, Kyle Kulinski explained it all on the podcast, clearly called it. And that's because that's a guy who's been really studying politics at a very comprehensive level for a long time, and he can give you the real information about it.
Yeah. Now, as you can see from Joe Rogan in that clip, he was praising Kyle Kulinski, and he was trying to basically say that to really understand politics, you have to spend a lot of time as kind of an entry level to be able to get an understanding of politics. Now, that's definitely true. You do have to do a lot of research. The truth is that really the striving for knowledge never really ends with politics. There's always something new that you need to or should learn that a lot of people don't know. But it brings up an interesting question about Kyle Kulinski, because is he that super informed politics guy? If that's what Joe Rogan here is saying, it seems more like he's saying he's an example of someone who's very informed. So I think that for Kyle, in my opinion, he's obviously pretty informed for the most part, I would say, definitely. And he gives him credit for actually calling the whole Red Mirage situation with the election. And so I want to give Kyle credit for that too, because he was actually covering that for weeks before, at least 1 or 2 weeks before the election. And so he had really brought a lot of awareness to that, definitely brought me a lot of awareness to it as well. And what he ended up covering did end up happening. He also called that situation with Michael Avenatti, he ended up being this big scammer that was scamming old people, or had scammed an old person. So he had called that. but I wouldn't say that Kyle Kulinski is the person you go to for the most informed take. Now, that's not really what Joe Rogan here is saying. He's saying that, he's just an example of somebody who is very informed on politics. And so, ergo, he has like a legitimate opinion on politics, which I would agree with for the most part. He does do research. I know that people really got angry at him some people did, his fans, because he said that he didn't know what the transportation secretary role was, what that role actually meant. And the truth about being a political commentator is it's just impossible to know everything, even on the stuff that you're covering, let alone everything in general. There's just so much information to take in. I don't even know if the human brain is really built or meant to take in just so much information. And as a political commentator, you're stretched so thin because you have to hit so many different areas: history, economics, criminal justice, administration of justice, sociology, like all of these different things you have to know, international relations, political theory, comparative politics. There's so much stuff that you have to know, and the histories of countries are just so vast and so in depth. And so knowing like the role of the transportation secretary or just some role in the government, I think is not really reasonable. What is reasonable is to say, okay, if you're going to do a video on this, you should Google it and see at least what the U.S. government website says before you do the video. That's very fair, I would say. And I think that was the charge that some people were levying towards Kyle. But some of his fans started to basically think like, oh, wow, like he doesn't even seem that informed on what he's saying. Why should I even listen to him in the first place? And so for Kyle, he's more straightforward. He's not going to be as in-depth academically speaking. So you're not going to hear about, like post hoc ergo propter hoc or like post hoc fallacies or those kinds of things from him. You'll hear that from David Pakman. You probably not hear about like something like carried interest or something more, in the weeds in terms of issues like you will from Sam Seder. I feel like for Sam Seder, if you're looking for the most informed, Sam Seder's the one that you're going to go to. Now, the downside of Sam Seder is he's incredibly boring, right? And so that makes it hard to digest because he's incredibly boring. And so that's the trade-off you have, right? Kyle is more entertaining, but he's not as informed as Sam Seder on the issues. He's not as much of a policy wonk on these issues as, Sam is, but he's more entertaining. Now, David is also going to be informed, but he is going to bring a lot of logic, a lot of logical sciences, and a lot of philosophical stuff into it as well. So you will hear like, post hoc or, ad hoc or whatever. You'll hear these different, logical things. He even has videos breaking down logic. And so you can you get that from him, which is also obviously a much higher, intellectual state, obviously. And so that's a good thing. You're not going to get that from Kyle, but that's what makes Kyle very, marketable, I would say. Like, I think the biggest thing holding him back is not that he's not on Twitch or doesn't have podcast on iTunes. The biggest thing holding him back is he's reporting late on the news. And so I'll do a separate video about this, but he does have a video that he dropped immediately when Russia had sent its peacekeeping troops, which essentially is an invasion. He posted it very quickly. It's at like 200,000 views, and coincidentally, he's at 974,000 subscribers when prior to that he was stuck at 973. So that's the biggest thing I think holding him back. Being timely with the news would really boost his channel. I would say it's impressive that he covers news so late, yet consistently gets such good view counts without pandering to anybody. These other channels like Jimmy Dore is going to pander to, anti-Trumpers or whatever and anti-vaxxers. And I know, Kyle panders a bit to, obviously he panders to Joe Rogan fans, but I don't think that really has that big of an impact on his audience, especially when you look at the views of other videos that don't have anything to do with Joe Rogan. So he does do a little bit of pandering there, but not to that extent. So his views are very impressive, and it goes to show you how popular he is. And the reason why he is popular is because he's not going to say, this is a post hoc fallacy, or he's not going to talk about carried interest or something like that. And so it makes him more marketable, more digestible, right, to people. And so I think that that's part of the reason why he is, very popular. And so I do want to give Kyle some credit, I guess. I should give him some credit on that realm. He has done some videos about like moral relativism and talking about Noam Chomsky and stuff like that, which is obviously, higher thinking in terms of, going into academia and understanding moral schools of thought, whether or not is all moral code essentially, the same as is any one moral code supreme to the other. And so, he has some of that, which, so I don't want to completely, discredit the guy. But, the guy you would go to for, super informed takes is Sam Cedar. Then if you want kind of more like academia based stuff, you're going to probably go to David Pakman. And so, hopefully this channel can be a mix of all three. But anyways, let me know what you think about this down below. Joe Rogan bringing Ben Burgis on to try to desperately quell down the backlash that he's getting by bringing on a left-wing guest. Although it seems like a lot of lefties are actually pretty disappointed in Ben Burgis right now. So let me know your thoughts on this down below. Curious to hear them as always.